Welcome back to the Bionicle Inspiration series. We inspire you with mocks from across the Bionicle community, and today we're going to be talking about monsters, big scary monsters, or more specifically, kaiju as well. So, a lot of people were asking after I did the previous episode about mechs that were very heavily inspired by Invasion from Below, the old Hero Factory theme. They said, well, can you do a kaiju episode? So here you go. Here's an episode on exactly that. And yeah, you could take a lot of inspiration for this if you were working on some Invasion from Below mocks. So another Hero Factory adjacent episode today. HF Feb continues well into April. So let's begin with a mock by the underscore double, and this is the Mountain Hopper. So I think it's great to be seeing some of these Ant-Man set wing pieces being used here. Such an underrated but amazing piece that whenever I see it being used, it's used so well. And I feel like with kaiju, you can really get away with blending in different aspects of different creatures into something that becomes this almost like, I guess, Lovecraftian creature. I mean, like kaiju and Lovecraft creatures, they're definitely different things, but I think there's still like a decent amount of overlap between the two, and I kind of want to discuss that a little bit here. I think that's also something I'm going to be doing in this episode, is drawing a lot of parallels to other source material. People in the past have asked for like, oh, what if you did a BIS episode just about like, not even Lego related, just like random images that could be used for inspiration? And that's a great idea. So we're going to kind of sort of do that this episode, I guess. But let me like highlight the differences between a Lovecraftian monster and a kaiju. So I got this definition from andasciencefiction.com. I'll have a link in the description. So a Lovecraftian monster is at its core something that is so alien to the human experience that both the reader and the protagonist are incapable of true comprehension. Obviously, that quote was mentioning a lot of like reading and stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of Lovecraft stuff is inspired by the writer H.P. Lovecraft. It's in the name. He did a lot of stuff with Cthulhu and stuff like that. So, it's things that are very closely related to that. Big, huge, terrifying monsters with many tentacles, many eyes, all sorts of other craziness. So crazy that I whack my desk as I'm speaking there. It's almost incomprehensible to look at. But a kaiju, more specifically, is a giant monster often featured in Japanese fantasy or science fiction films and television programs and things like that. So very different origins, and still, I would say, fairly different types of monsters, but still inherently monsters, and there's still like decent enough differences, and definitely two things you can get a lot of inspiration for if you are building a kaiju. Another interesting thing I saw when I was just looking up definitions of the differences between the two is that people are saying that kaiju are more so about like destruction, learning their abilities and then finding ways of, how to stop them or destroy them or deal with them. Whereas a Lovecraftian monster, they pretty much exist to instill a sense of fear and terror, like beyond anything you've ever known sort of thing, into a person, and they kind of like lose their sanity as a result of it sort of thing. It's still pretty decent differences there. And hopefully seeing some of those cool kaiju pictures there will give you a bit of inspiration anyway. But I think the idea of looking into actual Lovecraftian monsters and things that inspire Lovecraftian monsters like, weird fish, other like subterranean creatures, again, very Invasion from Below, even weird like mushrooms and fungus and like dinosaurs, prehistoric animals, all that sort of stuff. I think it's important to look into that kind of stuff, because if you are stuck for ideas, look to other art, look to concept art, look to other weird and strange, wonderful things, because it'll definitely get your attention and definitely get you some inspiration. And this actual mock was inspired by a real world creature called a tree hopper. Here's one here. So they have these weird, unique crests on their head, and that's what sort of formed the unique crest on this actual mock. So while it's not inherently Lovecraftian inspired, I think it's just worth noting that inspiration does come in all sorts of weird places, and it certainly makes sense to study other source materials of big giant monsters and things like that to get similar ideas. So certainly something to consider. But going back to what I was originally saying with those Ant-Man wings, but even the fact that this mock has like bug-like legs or multiple legs, there's a lot of kind of bug inspiration here, but it still kind of fits within that vein of thinking, I think. A nice part use with this, I like seeing the Shadow Matoran wings being used on that crest that I was speaking about before. It's a piece that people just don't use much, and I know I've still got a few in my collection. I've just barely touched them, but when you do put them to good use like this, they're awesome. But people don't use them that much, but they certainly have good uses. So I certainly got sidetracked. I didn't really talk specifically about the mock, but there's a lot of nice stuff going here to create a very effective monster kaiju creature. But hey, sometimes the sort of ideology behind stuff and the inspiration before it can be just as valuable a lesson to learn if you're looking to to study the ways that you can continue to build and all that. So love the work done here. Let's move over now to the next kaiju. This is by Ron Folkers, and this is called Chitensora. It's super nice to see so much part spamming on the back of this mock. There's this kind of nice line of spikes, which kind of still fits within that part spamming here. And seeing a nice line of spikes obviously feels very sort of alligator-like, or obviously very Godzilla-like. Definitely a very important kaiju in that sense. But it also reminds me of some of the spikes that you see, or just sort of the more kind of rough back designs that you see on some of the different creatures from Pacific Rim, which is a fantastic movie to be getting inspiration for kaiju and big monsters, because it's most of the film, and there's a lot of different nice designs in those films as well. So certainly something to look into as well for more inspiration. I also enjoy the fact that these claw pieces have been repeated in a manner to create this, I guess, like reptilian body design. There's something about it that's just a really nice texture. And the fact that it's a lot of trans orange being used, it gives me this sense that this mock maybe, if it came to life sort of thing, would breathe fire, and maybe all the trans orange would light up as the flames are created in its body and dispelled through the mouth. It's cool how just like the inclusion of one specific color and the way it's sort of dispersed across the body immediately gives me this sense of how this creature would move or interact or attack. That's really fun, and it's just a lovely example of how part spamming can just look so nice as well. I also enjoy seeing these Vakama Hordika masks on the belly. The fact that they are still a fairly different color. I mean, obviously trans orange and red are pretty close in terms of coloration. They definitely pair nicely with each other, but still the dark red isn't really used anywhere else. It's just kind of concentrated on the belly there. That additional accent of color is very nice to see, and kind of makes sense when you look at a lot of real life creatures. Often the coloration of their belly is different to the other parts of their body, so it works with sort of a real world parallel. But it's also just nice to see an extra pop of color there too. So really, really like that. And the final detail, the whole face design here is great. Seeing the pupils on the eyes there and that big open mouth, which is like almost slightly adorable, but the kind of facial expression also gives me this sense that this is some like rabid, crazy creature that just runs around destroying stuff. So a lot of personality behind that face. Just looks really, really cool and kind of cute. So love it. The next mock we're going to go to now, this one here is built by Animator X Studios, and this is Furno versus the Uvakux, Destroyer of the Beneath. That's what we're going to go with. You know what? We talked about before how like kaiju and Lovecraftian, or more specifically Lovecraftian monsters have so much about them that they're hard to comprehend. That name is hard for me to comprehend. So you're hitting hitting it on the hitting the nail on the head. So you're even disturbing my analogies as well. So there you go. Still, I do actually like that name. It's very fitting, very cool. But what I think is very nice about this mock is the strange head design. Again, this reminds me of other Pacific Rim kaiju. It's almost like hammerhead shark inspired, I suppose. But I like the idea that with kaiju mocks, you really do have permission to just do crazy, weird, unique head designs, because it works. You can get away with it. If you're building a real world creature, you can't really just give your lion this sudden T-shaped head or something strange. But it works well on kaiju. You can get away with it. So, you also see that here with the large claws on both of the hands here. And we spoke before about, kaijus and fighting and all that sort of stuff. You like to see their cool attacks and how they move, how they strike things, all that sort of stuff. So again, it's nice to see that you get permission to really just let loose on big weapons, larger body parts, or strange head designs, because it's right in the vein with any kind of big monster or a kaiju in this sense. So love that. I also like seeing some rocky armor pieces being used here, implying that maybe this monster has a tougher hide that's harder to cut through, or if you shoot it, it's a little bit more well protected. A nice addition there, definitely. I also like seeing that he's built a separate mock for Furno here. I'm not going to discuss Furno that much here, because we're just specifically focusing on the kaiju in this episode today. But still, it's a lovely little Furno mock, and I still think the ideas of Invasion from Below being about heroes versus monsters is really fun. And obviously, Invasion from Below was heroes in mech suits, but nothing wrong with them not having mech suits this time. I mean, even with some of the photography here, I kind of like that story of Furno's lost his mech suit, and now he has to fight off the monsters all by himself. He's just got his gun and maybe a blade, and that's about it. Can he survive? It's a cool idea. Nice little storytelling going on here in some of these photos. Hey, if you are planning on building a kaiju, why not build something to fight it as well, whether it's in a mech suit or just a random dude or a warrior or whatever. Could be a bit of fun. Or King Kong, why not? But yeah, love that here. Looks really, really nice. On to the final mock now. We're going to move over to... I was just about to start reading my notes and just not explain the name of the mock because I was on a different tab on my computer. This is by Constantine T, and this is Lizard of the Abyss. So, immediately what grabbed me about this mock is the unique shape of it. It reminds me of the Rod Reese Titan from Attack on Titan. The fact that it's crawling along on its belly, which I guess you could argue is very kind of lizard-like in that sense. But I don't know, this, to me, feels slightly more human, slightly. And it's certainly the case with the Rod Reese Titan in Attack on Titan. It's deliberately strange and weird because it is crawling on its belly and hiding its head and stuff like that. So it's nice to see this giant mass just being dragged across the floor as it makes its way towards this castle-like town over there. Because, yeah, there's just something about this that feels so inhuman. And I think that's a really great direction to be aiming towards if you're building a kaiju because... whenever you watch like a monster movie, for example, 9 times out of 10, the monster isn't going to look very human. They take a lot of notes with the design to really make sure that it looks inhuman, hence the word inhuman. I think that's often what makes it scarier because it's harder to relate to it or to feel a sense of understanding because it looks like you in any sense. It looks so far away from you that you're just repulsed by it or you're like, oh, I don't know what to make of this, But, just because it doesn't look like you doesn't mean you should try and kill it, although if it's trying to kill you by running towards your own castle village, maybe you should, but you get the idea, right? It looks so completely different from a typical kind of humanoid character that's what makes it creepy. So definitely aim for that sort of look. Can you give it multiple limbs? Can you have it, its head be sort of more towards the front in that sense, and it's sort of bent over more like a lizard? It's got spikes all over its back. It's got multiple tails. How strange and weird can you make it look? Because it's just going to be really effective and like we see here, make for an incredible design. It's also nice to see this big sea of black and then this tiny little hint of red for the eye design there. The fact that is just a red cross pin as well is a very clever way of introducing the eye because, I'm sure they've used other pins throughout this mock and they've all been black so it doesn't disturb the color scheme, but just making sure that one's red there where it is on the eye is a very nice touch and a great way of just sort of subtly introducing the eye design there. But yeah, it's just wonderfully piercing just because it's so tiny compared to the rest of the mock. It's really, really cool to see. I also enjoy seeing the crazy swinging tails, a very simple design, very posable design because it's so many of those tiny bone pieces there. But it certainly gets the job done, and just it's kind of a nice defining point of this mock, seeing those two crazy tails at the back there. I just love how that looks. And then I also enjoy the sense of scale that this mock has, the fact that it is attacking the city. And sure, we saw that with the mock at the start here, but it's nice to note that when we've spoken about kaiju before, a big element of them is that they're big, towering, huge creatures. And it's kind of difficult to convey that with Lego unless you actually want to build a giant mock, but that's easier said than done. So why not just do something like this? Build it at a reasonably sized scale and just build a little tiny micro scale city next to it so that it implies that it's massive. That implied sense of scale will certainly go a long way with a kaiju mock like this. I love how it's been done here. And I love the sort of sense of storytelling. You can see it really marching towards it. You get a sense of how this creature would move. It's a little bit terrifying, but really cool. And I guess that's a great way to sum up this entire episode. A little bit terrifying, but pretty cool. A lot of very, very well-built kaiju mocks in this episode, and hopefully it's given you a bit of inspiration, seeing a bit more kind of thought process behind kaiju, a lot of different inspiration images, and what makes a kaiju, what makes a Lovecraftian creature, and all that stuff in between. Hopefully that's also helped inspire you, because while it's nice to just look at actual Lego to give you some inspiration, many other things in the real world can give you inspiration too. So if you'd like to submit some of your own mocks to the show, you can submit them through the email that's currently on your screen. There's no right way to do it. Just send me whatever you've got to an email and I'll do my best to base an episode around it, whatever it is that you submit. And I will also have the links in my description to all the mocks that you saw in today's episode, so be sure to check out some of the other stuff that these builders have built. And there's also links to my own social media as well, so you can see stuff that I've got going on over there. Thank you very much for watching. Happy building. Bye for now.